Hi everyone, welcome back. Happy Sunday. Today we are continuing with, the book of 2 Samuel. All right, let's get started. Chapter 1. After the death of Saul, David returned from his defeat of the Amalekites and spent 2 days in Ziklag. On the third day, a man came from Saul's camp with his clothes torn and dirt on his head. Going to David, he fell to the ground in homage. David asked him, "Where do you come from?" He replied, "I have escaped from the Israelite camp." "Tell me what happened," David bade him. He answered that the soldiers had fled the battle and that many of them had fallen and were dead, among them Saul and his son Jonathan. Then David said to the youth who was reporting to him, "How do you know that Saul and his son Jonathan are dead?" The youthful informant replied, "It was by chance that I found myself on Mount Gilboa and saw Saul leaning on his spear, with chariots and horsemen closing in on him. He turned around and, seeing me, called me to him. When I said, 'Here I am,' he asked me, 'Who are you?' And I replied, 'An Amalekite.' Then he said to me, 'Stand up to me, please, and finish me off, for I am in great suffering, yet fully alive.' So I stood up to him and dispatched him, for I knew that he could not survive his wound. I removed the crown from his head and the armlet from his arm and brought them here to my lord." David seized his garments and rent them, and all the men who were with him did likewise. They mourned and wept and fasted until evening for Saul and his son Jonathan, and for the soldiers of the Lord of the clans of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword. Then David said to the young man who had brought him the information, "Where are you from?" He replied, "I am the son of an Amalekite immigrant." David said to him, "How is it that you were not afraid to put forth your hand to desecrate the Lord's anointed?" David then called one of the attendants and said to him, "Come, strike him down." And the youth struck him a mortal blow. Meanwhile David said to him, "You are responsible for your own death, for you testified against yourself when you said, 'I dispatched the Lord's anointed.'" Then David chanted this elegy for Saul and his son Jonathan, which is recorded in the book of Jashar to be taught to the Judites. He sang, "Alas, the glory of Israel, Saul, slain upon your heights. How can the warriors have fallen? Tell it not in Gath, herald it not in the streets of Ashkelon. Lest the Philistine maidens rejoice like the daughters of the strangers exalt. Lest the daughters of the strangers exalt. Mountains of Gilboa, may there be neither dew nor rain upon you, nor you surgings of the deeps. Upon you lie begrimed the warriors' shields, the shield of Saul no longer anointed with oil. From the blood of the slain, from the bodies of the valiant, the bow of Jonathan did not turn back, or the sword of Saul return unstained. Saul and Jonathan, beloved and cherished, separated neither in life nor in death, swifter than eagles, stronger than lions. Women of Israel, weep over Saul, who clothed you in scarlet and in finery, who decked your attire with ornaments of gold. How can the warriors have fallen in the thick of the battle, slain upon your heights? I grieve for you, Jonathan, my brother. Most dear have you been to me. More precious have I held love for you than love for women. How can the warriors have fallen? The weapons of war have perished." Chapter 2. After this, David inquired of the Lord, "Shall I go up into one of the cities of Judah?" The Lord replied to him, "Yes." Then David asked, "Where shall I go?" He replied, "To Hebron." So David went up there accompanied by his 2 wives, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. David also brought up his men with their families, and they dwelt in the cities near Hebron. The men of Judah came there and anointed David king of the Judites. A report reached David that the men of Jabesh Gilead had buried Saul. So David sent messengers to the men of Jabesh Gilead and said to them, "May you be blessed by the Lord for having done this kindness to your lord Saul and burying him. And now may the Lord be kind and faithful to you. I, too, will be generous to you for having done this. Take courage, therefore, and prove yourselves valiant men, for though your lord Saul is dead, the Judites have anointed me their king." Abner, son of Ner, Saul's general, took Ishabal, son of Saul, and brought him over to Mahanaim, where he made him king over Gilead, the Asherites, Jezreel, Ephraim, Benjamin, and the rest of the Israel. Ishbal, son of Saul, was 40 years old when he became king over Israel, and he reigned for 2 years. The Judites alone followed David. In all, David spent 7 years and 6 months in Hebron as king of the Judites. Now Abner, son of Ner, and the servants of Ishbal, Saul's son, left Mahanaim for Gibeon, Joab son of Zeruiah, and David's servants also set out and met them at the pool of Gibeon. And they sat down, one group on one side of the pool and the other on the opposite side. Then Abner said to Joab, "Leave the young men, rise and perform for us." Joab replied, "All right." So they rose and were counted off, 12 of the Benjaminites of Eshbal, son of Saul, and 12 of David's servants. Then each one grasped his opponent's head and thrust his sword into his opponent's side, and all fell down together. And so that place, which is in Gibeon, it was named the Field of the Sides. After a very fierce battle that day, Abner and the men of Israel were defeated by David's servants. The 3 sons of Jeruiah were there, Joab, Abishai, and Asahel. Asahel, who was as fleet of foot as a gazelle in the opposite field, set out after Abner, turning neither right nor left in his pursuit. Abner turned around and said, "Is that you, Asahel?" He replied, "Yes." Abner said to him, "Turn right or left, seize one of the young men, and take what you can strip from him." But Asahel would not desist from his pursuit. Once more Abner said to Asahel, "Stop pursuing me. Why must I strike you to the ground? How could I face your brother Joab?" Still he refused to stop. So Abner struck him in the abdomen with the heel of his javelin, and the weapon protruded from his back. He fell there and died on the spot, and all who came to the place where Asahel had fallen and died came to a halt. Joab and Abishai, however, continued to the pursuit of Abner. The sun had gone down when they came to the hill of Ammah, which lies east of the valley toward the desert near Geba. Here the Benjaminites rallied around Abner, forming a single group, and made a stand on the hilltop. Then Abner called to Joab and said, "Must the sword destroy to the utmost? Do you not know that afterward there will be bitterness? How much longer will you refrain from ordering the people to stop pursuit of their brothers?" Joab replied, "As God lives, if you had not spoken, the soldiers would not have been withdrawn from the pursuit of their brothers until morning." Joab then sounded the horn, and all the soldiers came to a halt, pursuing Israel no further and fighting no more. Abner and his men marched all night long through the Arabah, crossed the Jordan, marched all through the morning, and came to Mahanaim. Joab, after interrupting this pursuit of Abner, assembled all the men. Besides Asahel, 19 other servants of David were missing, but David's servants had fatally wounded 360 men of Benjamin, followers of Abner. They took up Asahel and buried him in his father's tomb in Bethlehem. Joab and his men made an all-night march, and dawn found them in Hebron. Chapter 3. There followed a long war between the house of Saul and that of David, in which David grew stronger, but the house of Saul weaker. Sons were born to David in Hebron, the firstborn Amnon of Ahonim from Jezreel, the second Caleb of Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel, the third Absalom, son of Maacah, the daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur, the fourth Adonijah, son of Haggith, the fifth Shephitah, son of Abdital, and the sixth, these names are difficult, sorry for the butchering of the pronunciations, Ithraim of David's wife Eglah. These were born to David in Hebron. During the war between the house of Saul and that of David, Abner was gaining power in the house of Saul. Now Saul had a concubine, Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah, and Ishbaal, son of Saul, said to Abner, "Why have you been intimate with my father's concubine?" Enraged at the words of Ishbaal, Abner said, "Am I a dog's head in Judah? At present I am doing a kindness to the house of your father Saul, to his brothers and to his friends, by keeping you out of David's clutches. Yet this day you charge me with a crime involving a woman. May God do thus and so to Abner if I do not carry out for David what the Lord swore to him. That is, take away the kingdom from the house of Saul and establish the throne of David over Israel and over Judah from Dan to Beersheba." In his fear of Abner, Ishbaal was no longer able to say a word to him. Then Abner sent messengers to David in Tillam, where he was at the moment, to say, "Make an agreement with me, and I will aid you by bringing all Israel over to you." He replied, Very well, I will make an agreement with you, but one thing I require of you. You must not appear before me unless you bring back Michal, son's daughter, when you come to present yourself to me." At the same time, David sent messengers to Ishbal. Remember, she had been his wife. And she helped him escape. At the same time, David sent messengers to Ishbal, son of Saul, to say, "Give me my wife Michal, whom I espoused by paying 100 Philistine foreskins." Ishbal sent for her and took her away from her husband, Paltiel, son of Laish, who followed her weeping as far as Bahurim. But Abner said to him, "Go back," and he turned back. Abner then said it in discussion with the elders of Israel, "For a long time you've been seeking David as your king. Now take action, for the Lord has said of David, 'By my servant David I will save my people Israel from the grasp of the Philistines and from the grasp of all their enemies.'" Abner also spoke personally to Benjamin and then went to make his own report of David in Hebron concerning all that would be agreeable to Israel and to the whole house of Benjamin. When Abner, accompanied by 20 men, came to David in Hebron, David prepared a feast for Abner and for the men who were with him. Then Abner said to David, "I will now go assemble all Israel for my lord the king, that they may make an agreement with you. You will then be king over all whom you wish to rule." So David bade Abner farewell, and he went away in peace. Just then David's servants and Joab were coming in from an expedition, bringing much plunder with them. Abner, having been dismissed by David, was no longer with him in Hebron, but he had gone his way in peace. When Joab and the whole force he had with him had arrived, he was informed, "Abner, son of Ner, came to David. He has been sent on his way in peace." So Joab went to the king and said, "What have you done? Abner came to you. Why did you let him go peacefully on his way? Are you not aware that Abner came to deceive you and to learn the ins and outs of all that you are doing?" Joab then left David, and without David's knowledge sent messengers after Abner, who brought him back to the cistern of Sirah. When Abner returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside within the city gate, as though to speak with him privately. There he stabbed him in the abdomen, and he died in revenge for the killing of Joab's brother Asahel. Later David heard of it and said, "Before the Lord, I and my kingdom are forever innocent. May the full responsibility for the death of Abner, son of Ner, be laid on Joab and to all his family. May the men of Joab's family never be without one suffering from a discharge or a leper or one unmanly, one falling by the sword or one in need of bread." Joab and his brother Abishai had lain in wait for Abner because he killed their brother Asahel in battle at Gibeon. Then David said to Joab and to the people who were with him, "Rend your garments, gird yourselves with sackcloth, and mourn over Abner." King David himself followed the bier. When they had buried Abner in Hebron, the king wept aloud at the grave of Abner, and the people also wept. And the king sang this elegy over Abner. "Would Abner have died like a fool? Your hands were not bound with chains, nor your feet placed in fetters. As men fall before the wicked, you fell." And all the people continued to weep for him. Then they went to console David with food while it was still day. But David swore, "May God do thus and so to me if I eat bread or anything else before sunset." All the people noted this with approval, just as they were pleased with everything that the king did. So on one day all the people and all Israel came to know that the king had no part in the killing of Abner, son of Ner. The king then said to his servants, "You must recognize that a great general has fallen today in Israel. Although I am the anointed king, I am weak this day, and these men, the sons of Zeruiah, are too ruthless for me. May the Lord requite the evildoer in accordance with his evil deed." In chapter 4. When Ishbal, son of Saul, heard that Abner had died in Hebron, he ceased to resist, and all Israel was alarmed. Ishbal, son of Saul, had 2 company leaders named Baanah and Rechab, sons of Rimmon the Beerothite, and of the tribe of Benjamin. Beeroth, too, was ascribed to Benjamin. The Beerothites fled to Gittaim, where they have been resident alien to this day. Jonathan, son of Saul, had a son named Meribal with crippled feet. He was 5 years old when the news about Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel, and his nurse took him up and fled. But in their hasty flight he fell and became lame. The sons of Rimmon and the Beerothite, Rechab and Baanah, came into the house of Ishbal during the heat of the day while he was taking his siesta. The portress of the house had dozed off while sifting wheat and was asleep, so Rechab and his brother Baanah slipped past and entered the house. while Ishbaal was lying asleep in his bedroom. They struck and killed him and cut off his head. Then, taking the head, they traveled on the Arabah road all night long. They brought the head of Ishbaal to David in Hebron and said to the king, "This is the head of Ishbaal, son of your enemy Saul, who sought your life. Thus has the Lord this day avenged my lord, the king, on Saul and his posterity." But David replied to Rechab and his brother Baanah, sons of Rimmon the Beerothite, "As the Lord lives, who rescued me from all difficulty in Ziklag, I seized and put to death the men who informed me of Saul's death, thinking himself the bearer of good news for which I ought to give him a reward. How much more now, when wicked men have slain an innocent man in bed at home, must I hold you responsible for his death and destroy you from the earth?" So at a command from David, the young men killed them and cut off their hands and feet, hanging them up near the pool of Hebron. But he took the head of Ishbaal and buried it in Abner's grave in Hebron. And that's where we're going to stop today. Not a nonviolent passage, but something that always stands out to me is how David, at this time at least, in these matters of war, really, he seemed to have a great honor about him. When somebody, rushes to him and brags about, the death of somebody else, it's or having finished, the messenger that killed Saul, at Saul's request even, David was not pleased by this news because Saul was God's anointed at the time. And David doesn't reward that behavior when somebody, whether they were well-intentioned or not isn't ours to judge, but they took revenge on behalf of David and they brought this to him expecting, I don't know if they a reward or just praise or something. They did something on behalf of David that he hadn't asked for. He didn't appreciate them killing an otherwise innocent man in his eyes, in the world's eyes, out of pretending to do it for him. Again, their motivation, I don't know. We weren't there, but there was an honor to these early days of King David that I think we all should just take note of and remember. Yeah, we're going to stop there. Okay, enough rambling. Let us bow our heads and say the Lord's Prayer together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not to temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Amen. All right. I hope you have a great week, and I will see you next Sunday. Bye-bye.